Okay, welcome to the Price Like a Pro class. We have a lot of sponsors who have helped us out. Their names are on the screen. Our business, the Balloon Guild, is growing really fast, and these are people who have helped us with this class to get the word and the information out. They're the reason a lot of you are here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And hopefully you guys get some good business and customers as a result. So this is the Price Like a Pro class, and we are going to cover a lot of information. So strap in. I started my own business in 2001. Like many people, I started using my social security number, and just that's how I started. A sole proprietorship is what it's called. And I started as a balloon twister, twisting balloon animals for tip money. A handful of years later, I became the manager of that company, and that's where I started learning a little bit about business. And then a few years after that, I bought that company. And that's when I learned what an LLC is. And that's when I kind of took business pretty serious, because then all the responsibilities riding on my shoulders and I had to make it work. So a few years after that, I bought my first balloon decorating business. And then in the years following, I bought several more businesses and mashed them all together. Before COVID, I finally moved out of my house, which was a big step. Before that, even, I had employees who worked with me in my house. Don't really recommend that, but that's what I did. And then moved out. And then right before COVID happened, like literally the beginning of March, I had a grand opening for a store, 2020. And then pretty much I closed the store, after the grand opening, because that didn't, a storefront wasn't going to work out. But I still worked out of the location. I just don't want people coming into my shop, not because of COVID, but just because starting a storefront was, for me, it was something I was doing because I was getting bored. And after COVID, it was a matter of survival, and being bored wasn't a problem that I had anymore. So it wasn't something I wanted to continue. Now, we're going to go through a lot of numbers, and my best year was 2022. And it is also the last year that I have numbers for. I don't have my 2023 taxes done yet. So I'm going to use the numbers that I have all the details for. And that year was around 750 in sales. So when you see some of my numbers coming through, that's where they're coming from. Okay, we're going to cover a lot, and it's going to go in and out of pricing. And there are some examples we're going to give where I'm going to kind of blaze through some of the numbers. And then there's other examples where we're going to slow way down, and we're going to do every little number so that you have a good grasp of what's going on. So if I blaze through numbers on one of the examples, don't worry about it unless you're just lost. Then put it in the chat and I'll try to help you out. But we are going to cover mastering pricing essentials and why that's important. We are going to cover the key factors that influence your pricing. We're going to take a little bit of time and talk about the pitfalls that you can have when doing your prices. You won't have them after this class necessarily, but they're pitfalls that we all have had at one point or another, I believe, unless you're just a pricing rock star, which would be good for you. We are going to talk about understanding 4 different pricing strategies. Now, there are a lot of pricing strategies, but we're going to cover the 4 that are applicable to this industry the most. We are going to take some time and crunch some numbers for a few examples, like some very specific examples that will range across the scope of just all the random things that are thrown your way for people to want you to give them prices for. We're going to talk about updating your prices and why that's important for you. Then we're going to finish with effectively communicating your price to and with your customers. And then at the very end, we will have time for questions and answers. Okay, now, pricing concepts, they're basically the fundamental principles and strategies that businesses use to determine the prices of your products and services. So in other words, it's the game plan that you're going to use for determining your prices. It's not just pulling a number out of a hat and deciding that's what you're going to do. We're going to put some thought into it, and this is going to require you to get information. You're going to do some cost analysis. You're going to look at your your market, what it's like. You're going to potentially to see what your competitors are doing. We're going to talk about perceived value, profit margins, all of that good stuff. But by applying these concepts effectively, you will be able to set prices that are competitive, profitable, and reflective of the value that you're offering to your customers. Now, this was a little bit of a Debbie Downer start for this. And it does make me sad because when I think of new businesses, I think of people who are starting something. It's their hopes, their dreams. They have put a lot of time and energy into this concept or this idea, and they have the courage to push play on it and make it start. So unless they're just crazy with no fear, they're putting a lot of eggs in this basket of business and getting out on their own. And it makes me really sad to think that 1 out of 5 are going to fail within their first year. That's kind of a bad number, which means 1 out of 5, right? So within 5 years, half of the businesses that are open do not make it past 5 years. You would think once you're 5 years in, it's kind of like, I don't know how long you guys have been married, but after 5 years, you're like, yeah, we've been through enough stuff. I don't see where we'd have any more problems. But that's not true, because within 10 years, even more businesses are failing. So now we're looking at 35% are succeeding beyond 10 years. Again, you would think, I've been doing this 10 years. That's a good long time. I should be good to go. And then if you're not careful, you're going to be in another group of people who have failed between 10 and 15 years. So only 25% of the businesses that start make it beyond 15 years. 1 out of 4. That is a relatively staggering number. And my goal for you guys is that the Balloon Guild, that we are a group of people who are that one, that we are going to succeed. And the other 3 out of 4 are people in different industries, different businesses, or hate to say it, but maybe they are not those Balloon Guild members, right? So my goal is to help you guys stay in business as long as you choose to stay in business. If you decide to close your doors because you're retiring, you're selling, you would rather go do something else, that's fine. I don't want you to close your doors because of something that you would consider a failure. So with these numbers that are pretty staggering in a negative way, my question for you guys is, why do you feel like this is the statistics? Why don't you guys put in the chat what you feel is the reason why these businesses are failing? While you're doing that, John, I'm going to send you somebody's number to touch base with. We have not pricing for profit. I like what you did there with the title of the thing. They're not utilizing educational tools, lack of resources, life, more money going out than coming in, no business plan, not enough profit, lack of systems, multiple businesses that do something standing out from the masses, lack of motivation, lack of confidence, lack of a plan, business management skills. Leah, I like that. Not part of the Balloon Boss Mastermind or the Balloon Guild. Lack of motivation. So, I mean, obviously we're in a pricing class, right? So 82% of businesses experience cash flow problems, or they flat out fail because of cash flow problems. So it's kind of a big deal. There's a lot of reasons why businesses fail, but cash flow problems is across the board. It is in every single list of why things fail for businesses. Every one of them in those lists, it makes every list. So the importance of this cannot be stressed enough. And it is because you have to have this correct so that you can drive profitability, have a competitive edge. You can ensure customer satisfaction by having the right prices, and you can ensure long-term success and sustainability for your business. That is the importance of getting this right. And it is also the reason why I personally have put so much into this class that I feel very confident in saying that there is not a balloon decorating company that has a class that is on par or goes in depth as much as this one does. So you guys are in the right place. And like I said, it's going to be pretty deep, and we're going to cover a lot of different areas, and we're going to get real nerdy with some numbers. So you guys are in the right place. All right. There are 4 key factors to influence pricing. The first one is one that I believe everybody knows about, and that is the tangible items that are required to do a job. You know, it costs you $15 for a bag of balloons, and then you know that you have to pay for ribbon, you have to pay more and more and more for helium, you have to pay for materials in order to do a job. That one is kind of a no-brainer, right? The second factor is the cost of labor. Now, this is one for, I'm curious right now. I want you to put, you're going to tell me where you're at in chat. If you're a solopreneur working by yourself, or if you're a team, if you work with a team, and then I want to know if you're home-based or shop or store or whatever. So you could put home or solo home or team home or solo workshop or team workshop or whatever. Yeah, a lot of solo homes. I'm pretty sure that's the great thing about this business is we can all start there, and you can run lean and mean working out of your house. Yeah, right on. Okay, a lot of solo home, which is exactly what I was expecting. So the cost of labor, I hope, is not something that you're overlooking. And what you need to realize at this place is you are the one who should be getting paid for the labor. And if you guys are just taking what's left after you've paid your bills, then you're probably not considering how much it is actually costing you to do the things that you're doing. And you might have a really crummy job where you're not getting paid enough to do it if somebody else offered you that same money to do a different job. So for the dollars per hour that you work. So one of the factors that will influence your pricing by the end of this is how much does it cost for you to pay somebody else to do that job? And if you're the one doing it, then you're the one receiving that pay, but you still need to build that into your prices. Market conditions are things that can be overlooked quite a bit, and they will definitely influence your pricing. And some of the big ones are what kind of clients you are pricing your items for will make a difference. And we'll see later, there are some clients who you actually need to raise your prices for them to take you serious and actually want to book you. Those are my favorite ones. You tell me you need my prices to be higher, so you think I'm a reputable company, and I pay every day, right? And then this one, overhead. How many of you know what overhead is? How many of you have done overhead in your business? And if so, when was the last time that you've done it? That you figured out what your overhead is? While you guys are typing your answers into the chat, I do overhead is basically all the other expenses that you're going to have in your business that no matter how many jobs you have, you can have 0 jobs and you still have bills. That is overhead. You could have 2 jobs and your overhead is still going to be the same. And for overhead, it can be something that can be a little bit scary to try to think of how do you tackle this? And you could see equations out there that are the cost of your materials plus labor plus a percentage of overhead plus a percentage of profit equals your selling price. And you're trying to figure out a selling price that you don't know with 2 other numbers that you don't even know. So it can be one of those things that just feels like it could be overwhelming to think about. But overhead are the expenses. Sometimes they're called fixed cost, and they're expenses you're going to have that are required to run a business. So at the very least, you should all have a business license and be insured. Doesn't matter if you do one job or a million, you should have those two things. Those are two things that would be considered in your overhead, right? And then there's a lot more that we're going to go over. There's a link that was just put in there for a worksheet. This worksheet is going to be a lifesaver for you guys, and it is going to make overhead something that is so easy for you to do that there's really no reason for you to not do it. It is an amazing tool, and it is something that might be a little bit eye-opening for you if you do it for the first time. So this is the number one question that you will see on any balloon group anywhere. And when you guys see this question, I want you to point the person asking it back to us. When they ask, how much would you guys charge for this? That is the wrong question. And the reason it's the wrong question is if you're asking me what I would charge for it, I work out of a building. I have employees. I have vehicles. I have insurance. I have all kinds of stuff that I pay for that you have no idea about because you're not the one who runs my business and knows my numbers. So what I would charge for it is based on a lot of factors that may not pertain to you. So the wrong question is, how much would you charge for it? The right question is, how much should I charge for this? As in, I'm the one asking the question, how much should I charge? And it's not asking someone else what they would charge, it's asking what I would charge. And that is a question that nobody can really answer for you without taking time to sit down with you and talk about some of your numbers and put some of the pen to the paper, so to speak. And in all reality, you guys aren't going to be asking this question after this course. There's only one way you would ask this question, and we'll get to it when we talk about something called competitive pricing. And you're going to ask it in a little bit of a different way because it's not how much would you charge for it, and then I'm just going to go charge that price. So as you guys have gone through pricing, here's what I would like for you to do. I'm going to be really honest with you. For me, there's 10 things that are pricing pitfalls that we're going to talk about. And I'm going to share with you the ones that I personally recognize have been something I've done in the past. I'm very curious for you guys, which ones of these kind of hit home a little like, yeah, I'm guilty of that or whatever. And just know after today, this won't be a problem for you the exact same way. But the first one is probably the most common one, and that is straight up underpricing. When you start doing balloons, it's hard to understand what do you price, especially when I can buy a bag of 100 balloons for $15 and I can make 2 balloon columns with those or more that I could sell for over $200. It's really, really crazy for me to imagine changing $15 to $200. The reality is that's not exactly what's going on, but that's the temptation to think that way. And then you feel guilty, like, oh, I shouldn't charge that much. It didn't cost me that much to make. And you overlook a lot of prices, and you end up pricing your decor in such a way that you're not charging enough. And if you don't charge enough, then your business is going to be one of those statistics that doesn't make us very happy. And then we're not doing our job as a guild helping you succeed. If you've ever been to an event that you charged a little bit of money for your decor and you show up and you look around and you're like, holy crap, they paid $2,000 for this item. They paid $3,000 for this. They have a daggone band playing that I know they paid all this money for. And you're thinking that I was worried about charging them $75 for a balloon column? Like, and then you feel bad. You show up and you feel like, oh man, I really did not charge enough. If you've ever had that feeling, underpricing was the reason why you did that. And hopefully you went home and you changed your prices. It's a good reason to change. The second one is overpricing. So you might think overpricing. Why would somebody ever really overprice? Oh, by the way, underpricing, I raised my hand on that one. That's one I've been guilty of. The example that I just gave you, it's an example from a long time ago. It was the thing that made me start changing my prices a long time ago. Overpricing is not something I typically have a problem with in general, not like a continual problem, but it is an overestimation of the cost of your goods and services price wise. Now, one of the reasons this could happen is you're setting your prices for a certain client, but maybe that's not the client you're actually approaching on a regular basis. So you're not meeting that client that needs that pricing to match with them. So that could be an example of overpricing, and you're not pricing for your specific market appropriately. The third one is one that I am definitely have been guilty of, and I will tell you a little brief story that will probably hit home for all of you. And I think at some levels we're all guilty of this. And it's kind of the example that I gave about a bag of balloons that cost $15 and I made 200 making 2 columns. I do fabric decorations, so I do backdrops and stuff like that. And I could get $1,000 job just putting fabric up. Now, fabric is not like balloons. I can put it up and then I take it down and bring it back to the shop and it goes nice, tidy, right back in the box. Which means the fabric doesn't cost me any money because I get it back. The pipe and drape poles, they didn't cost me any money because I get them right back. I've already paid for them a long time ago. So the temptation for me, and I've said this before, I've actually said this to my wife. We just did $1,000 job that took 2 employees 2 hours to set up. So that is 1 employee is 2 hours, another employee 2 more hours. That cost me 4 man hours to set up $1,000 job. The temptation and the things that I've said in the past is this job literally just cost me $100 to set up, and it was $1,000 job, which now I'm thinking, what is that? What are those numbers equal? $900 in profit. I have said something to that effect before, and you're going to see really soon when we start talking about overhead that that is not anything that you can ever say and make it a true, like a for real legit true statement. Because that statement that I just made ignores a lot of the costs that my business incurs on a regular basis. So in order to do that specific job, there are direct costs, but there's also fixed costs that aren't factored into that number. So the reality for that example is, well, you just did $1,000 job that cost me like $400 to $500 to do. That's still pretty good. $500 profit on $1,000 job, pretty good. Okay. Neglecting market research is another pitfall. I'm not talking about that we all need to like go get a 4-year degree in marketing and become, like crazy analyst or whatever, but you have to know what you're working with in your area, and you have to be able to adjust your prices accordingly. So a really big example, and this is very extreme, and I don't think any of us have done this, but if you were trying to push a bunch of corporate balloons in March of 2020, you probably weren't getting very far. I don't even care what you set your prices for. You weren't going to sell very many of them because you weren't paying attention to the market at the time, which is stay home, stay inside, nobody's going anywhere, right? So you have to know the market that you're trying to approach with the prices that you're offering and make sure that they are priced accordingly. We will talk in depth on this one, but blindly copying competitors. I'll say it again later, but I'm pretty sure most of us get into business because we want to be the boss of our own life. We want to be in control of our own decisions. We want to be responsible and take joy in the success. And we're willing to take the responsibilities for our failures, and we own those because we're the ones in charge. So if you blindly copy your competitor, then you are turning part of your decision making over to somebody else, And like I said before, you don't know everything going on that they are doing to make their prices. And you don't even have a clue if their prices are profitable for them or not. So blindly copying somebody else is a bad idea, and you're not going to win if that's what you do. Discounting too freely. I have been guilty of this, and I'm going to tell you how this one played out for me. And I think it's one that plays out for a lot of people this way. Oh, so how much is that arch? Oh, well, that arch is like 450, but I'll take 425. Like, I didn't even give my client a chance to respond to the 450 before I'm already throwing money away, and I'm giving them 25 bucks in that example. So the question is, why do we do that? And I think we do that because we're selling items most of the time. We're selling items at a price that we would not personally be willing to pay for them. And that makes it kind of tricky when we're selling it because we feel like, oh, it's not that valuable to me. But you got to think about the fact that if you're selling to you and your client base is a bunch of you, then your prices should actually be set in a certain place that you would pay for that all day, every day. And then your clients are going to do the same because you're selling to yourself. I don't ever sell to myself because I'm a bit more frugal than my clients are. My clients are typically corporate clients for the most part. They're spending companies' money. And I will also say this, as a business owner who has employees, I am way more willing to spend money for events and doing things for my employees than I actually would for my own household and my family because we're a little bit more frugal with our money. So there's something about being a corporate client where they're spending somebody else's money, it doesn't hit them the same. So we need to be mindful of not just giving a discount because we're nervous about the price we're throwing out. We need to be able to do promotions and sales on purpose, but every time you give a number, it doesn't need to automatically come down to a cheaper number, right? We need to give the client a chance to actually ask for a discount if they need one. Failing to communicate the value is a big pitfall. So the items that we make, we take a $15 bag of balloons, we throw it on a metal pole. Sometimes we use concrete on the base, sometimes we use metal bases, and that's what our clients get. Now, if I told that to a client, yeah, I'm going to take some latex balloons, I'm going to put them on a metal pole and a metal base, and then I'll put it outside your doors. That doesn't sound exciting at all for anybody. And that means if that is how I'm pricing my items based on that commentary, I'm not going to go very far. This is a little bit more about sales than it is about pricing. But when you do price your designs for your clients, we are not selling balloons to customers. What we are selling is the thing that balloons will bring. So, oh, you want your party to pop? Let me create this entrance for you. I can do a couple columns. They're big, beautiful. They're going to put a lot of color in a small space, and they're going to make your event like people. They're going to know this is where they need to be. They're going to know the party's here because of these two. I mean, I'm still talking about the same thing, just two columns outside their door. And one of those sounds a lot better than the other. One of them communicates the actual value, and the value isn't in the materials. The value is in the experience people are going to get when they interact with the materials or they see them. That's what you want to do. Ignoring pricing psychology. This would make a very, very interesting study that I think could be fun to do at another time. But I have two examples I feel like that are really pretty common for us. If I asked you how much did you pay for gas today, you might be tempted to tell me, I am curious, like we're up to like 358, 360 where I'm at in Florida. I don't know what everybody else is, but when I tell you that number, the reality is most of the time, we don't include that little tiny 9 that's at the end of the number. And they put it on there, like the 9 exists, right? If you look at the gas station boards, they don't hide the 9, they just make it small. But it's there, and that 3.609. That 9 actually is very close to an entire penny, but they make it look like it's 360 instead of 361. I know we're talking about a penny, but if gas stations are willing to consider the psychology of somebody buying based on a penny, then it's important to realize that there's something to pricing that really matters how it is communicated to customers, right? Another example is, how many times have you ever bought a car for 29 or for $30,000? Almost never. You will buy a car for 29,999 because they refuse to go the next dollar. On a $30,000 car, they refuse to add that dollar to the price because a $30,000 car sounds like it's more expensive than a $29,000 car that is also $999 more than 29,000. It just sounds like a bigger number. So, like I said, this would be worth an actual study. That would be fun to do. But the point is, don't ignore it. You can't ignore what your customers think when you give them prices. One thing that you could think about with this, and we'll talk about communicating value later, is package pricing. Everybody loves to feel like they're saving money, even when they don't care about the money that they're spending because it's from a budget. So if a customer has $1,000 budget and you're going to give them $1,100 worth of balloon decor, you're giving them the extra $100 in value that really probably cost you $5, right? $10. That's an easy add to add value. And again, this is back to sales, but I like my customers to know, you hand me $1,000, I'm going to give you 1,100 in return. Almost every time I'm going to go over your budget, and I'm not going to ask you for more unless it's way over your budget. And I do that because I want you to know your money's good with me and I'm going to make it bigger in return for you. There's something about that, right? There's something about looking at 4 items that are put together, and individually that would cost $600, but they're put together and now it's $550 and it's a package. And I'm saving $50 by booking all 4 of those items together, when really you're actually just glad they're booking 4 items, right? And it's in one package. They save $50. You sold 4 items. It's a win-win, right? So you can't ignore it. All right. I was pretty bad about this one for a while, and I have not been for the past handful of years. And that is adjusting prices over time, or more importantly, failing to do so. This is a really, 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 really big problem. And the reason is pretty easy to understand. And that is, if you do not adjust your prices, I guarantee you the world is. Everything that you are paying for now costs more money than it did 3 years ago. And if your prices are the exact same, then what you are doing is you are willing to go to work the same amount of work to make less money. So if I told you, look, you're making X amount of dollars right now, but if you come work for me, it's going to be the same work, but I'll pay you less. You would not like that equation at all. You would say, hard pass, Jonathan. Go try somebody else, right? But you do it to yourself by not raising your prices. And in the long run, your profit margin is going to get less and less, and then you're going to end up in trouble. So Balloon Guild members are not people who don't ever raise their prices. In other words, we are going to raise our prices to match the economy, to match a business that needs to succeed over time. And then the last one, I was there at the beginning, not so much anymore, and it is lacking confidence in your prices. I like to think a lack of confidence is an abundance of ignorance, which means you just don't know. I'm not calling anybody a name. It's more of a state of being. You don't know enough information to be confident in the things that you're saying when you're talking to your customers. After today, you are going to say, I've done my homework. I know exactly why my prices are what they are. And there is no world in which I'm not confident in giving these prices out because I know that's what they have to be for me to be successful. And I will be darned if I'm not going to be a successful business. Looking at the statistics, there is no way I'm going to be one of those on the bigger number at the end. I'm going to be part of the 25% that works until I decide I'm going to be done. Nobody's going to decide that for me. And the only way you're going to do that is having confidence in your pricing. And the only way you're going to have confidence is having knowledge and the reason why your prices are what they are. Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully, I'm assuming you guys have resonated on some levels with some of these, and we will help you take care of that. So in a little bit, it's going to be after the break. We're going to talk about 4 different pricing strategies, and I want to kind of give you like a little brief introduction to them, and then we're going to talk about overhead. Then we're going to end up taking a quick break. But the pricing strategies, the first one is cost plus, and it is basically, it's like some people call it markup pricing, and it's basically figuring up what it costs you to do a job. You add profit onto it, that's your selling price. We're going to get into specifics about how you do that, but that is a very realistic way that people can do their pricing. Then you have a value-based pricing strategy, which what that one does is you set your prices based on the value that you assume it has to your customers. And typically, a value-based pricing strategy is going to be more than the cost plus strategy. You have your competitive pricing strategy, which there is a way where it makes a little bit of sense, but not the way anybody ever does it. So when we talk about it, you're going to hear that it's not something that we recommend. And I give you an alternative to the competitive pricing strategy at the end. But a competitive pricing strategy is where your prices for everything you do are based solely on your competitors in your local market. Again, I don't know why you do that, but that is a strategy that people do, especially when they don't know how to do business themselves. You guys are here, so I'm assuming that you're the kind of people that want to be in charge of your own destiny. You want to make decisions for yourself and not let somebody else run your business for you. And I don't see that being something that you guys are going to be having an issue with. And then intuitive pricing is kind of one of the funnest ones for me to talk about, but it's also like gut pricing, and it's similar to a value-based strategy, except the difference is you are the one setting the value to the item, and then you give that to your customer. You're not really worried about how valuable it is to them. You're setting the value that you put on the item, and that's what you want to get for it, or it's a no-go, right? Okay. Now, here's a little brief overview of what overhead is, and then we're going to get to that worksheet. Overhead, I'm going to preface this by saying I am not a tax professional. There's some amazing tax professionals, the Fioris, that work a lot with balloon decorators. They're amazing. They could give you tax advice all day. I'm not one. So the information I'm going to share with you is coming from Jonathan Gerber, part business owner who knows a little bit about a lot of stuff. And that's what I'm going to share with you right now. But it's not tax advice. So if you guys rent a space for your work, it's obvious that rent is a deduction on your taxes. That's a no-brainer. Like, of course it's a deduction. Why wouldn't it be a deduction? You know what else is a deduction? The utilities for that space are a deduction. Now, if you use part of your home, which a lot of you did, you said you're solo home-based businesses, part of your house is being used for business. And if you're like me, it started with a room, and then it turned into like a room and the game room, and then it became the kitchen too. And then my wife is like, you got to go. Like, something has to change because I can't even cook dinner because we got balloons freaking everywhere in this house. Now, if you have a place that is more or less dedicated um, to your balloons. So for me here in this business, the Balloon Guild, I do most of my work in this home office. Um, this portion of my house, I intend on turning in that information to my tax person so they can do with it what they need to. And I'm pretty sure what that looks like is this portion of my house is X percentage of my total home space, right? So let's just say it's 10% of the size of my house is this one portion that I use for work. I think it is a 10% of my um, of my mortgage payment ends up being what's a deduction for the business. I'm pretty sure it's 10% of my utilities become a deduction for the business, but I'm not 100% sure. But what I do know is if you use your house for business, a portion of it is a write-off, and you don't want to overlook that because you're paying the rent, you're paying the mortgage either way. You might as well get some benefit to your business out of it. And when you do, it becomes part of your pricing because it goes into this thing called overhead. Paying salaries and benefits. If you pay somebody to answer the phones for you, it's really hard to determine what specific amount of minutes go into each individual job. And then what do you do with the minutes that they spend on the phone talking to somebody who doesn't book? Like you still have to pay them for it, and it's coming out of the business. So you pay somebody a salary, you pay somebody for jobs that don't include build this column, take this column here. Like if you pay somebody, regardless of the jobs that come in or out, that is part of your overhead. Office supplies that are used, you need to track all of that stuff. Maintenance and repairs on your vehicles, your equipment, your computer. You have professional services, advertising, marketing, insurance, taxes. Now, depreciation, I want to share with you, and then we'll, again, when we get to the form, I'm going to share with you how I would show this. What depreciation is we have equipment that we have to buy in our company, right? So let's say I'm going to buy a $2,000 inflator. I'm going to buy me a new Twin Air, and it costs me $2,000. Just nice even numbers for this example. I'm going to attribute a specific duration that I expect that machine to give me of life. And then I'm going to divide it out. So if that machine is $2,000, I'm going to say 5 years. I'm going to have a minimum of 5 years for it. So I'm going to take 2,000 divided by 5. That machine effectively costs me $400 a year. And that is going to be a number that I use for overhead. You can divide it out into dollars per month, which I'll show you in a minute, depending on how you're running your overhead numbers. But that is what that machine would be for me in a depreciation. Okay, if you guys could open the overhead worksheet, and I am going to open mine, and we are going to do a little bit of work. Alrighty. So I actually have two because I have numbers filled out on one of them. And then I have one I'm going to fill out with you guys right here. Okay, so you guys see this sheet. This is a blank one. Now, what I'm going to tell you is this sheet, first of all, is absolutely, positively amazing. And it is very in-depth, it's very detailed, and I'm going to tell you, none of that matters. The details don't matter for figuring up your overhead. What is important is the numbers that you put into it and the time that you are factoring. So all of your numbers need to correlate to a specific amount of time, which then needs to be, you're going to figure out how many jobs during that time, and you're going to go from there. Now, The reason why this part of the information is important is if you like to be a really organized individual. And I would recommend using it. And I would recommend if you have something you've paid for and you can't find it on this vast list, then guess what you can do? Other expenses. You can change this to whatever. Speeding ticket. Oh no, right? You can do that if you want to. You can change the information and put the numbers in here. Now, if you remember, I said that my numbers are coming from 2022. So I'm going to transport some of my numbers that I have from a different file into this one. And what that's going to look like is this. We are going to go with advertising. I spent $4,600. On this form, there's this orange, golden, marigold. Do you guys think in colors of balloons? Like, I want to say this is marigold, which is a Simpertex color that they don't make anymore. So now maybe I would say this is honey yellow or whatever, but that's aside the point. You can update this color all you want. What I would not recommend is updating the blue. Don't touch it. And if you look right here, you're going to see why. Because it is a sum. It's a formula that is built into this file, and you don't want to mess that up. If you do, what I would recommend is either undo it with the undo action or download a new one or whatever. So now we're going to go networking and memberships. And because I'm doing an entire year at one time, it doesn't matter where I put this information. I'm only going to put it in December because that's the easy thing to do. I will show you an example in a little bit of how you might do it month to month. And I'm also going to show you an example of what you would do if you remember dealing with depreciation. But in the meantime, I'm just going to get my numbers in here. So rent or lease, this number is a big one. $63,000. I have 2 spaces that I rent out. So I had a storage unit for part of the time. Water refill. This is basically drinks for the shop. And then I'm not actually sure what else that number represents, but it's definitely not just a bunch of water. 1, 2, 3. So what I did was I printed off a year-end report for 2022. I got all these numbers from it, and that's where these numbers are coming from. I'm not just making them up. In this report, there were 2 or 3 different ways that it was reporting. That is not what that's supposed to be. There are 2 or 3 different ways that we're reporting employee payroll stuff. That's what these numbers are supposed to be. So they're not in the right place. All right. I'm just going to leave them there. Remember what I said where it doesn't matter where you put them? These numbers here represent payroll for different employees, and there's different types of payroll that came out. So that's why those numbers ended up in this specific area. I'm just going to put the other numbers in here. It really doesn't matter what category they're for, but these are all different expenses that my business occurred throughout the year of 2022. And they are not in the right place. So don't go looking on this side saying, dang, Gerber paid $8,700 for shipping stuff. That's crazy. That is not going to be what that number represents. Again, for organization, whenever I'm going to keep this for this year and I want to be organized and I want to know where my numbers are and what they represent, you better believe I'm going to have this situated in such a way that it makes the most sense. And then the last number, 11380. So here's what happens. The blue at the bottom is going to automatically update. There is a number somewhere that I'm missing that is about $4,000. All right. So I spent, somewhere I misput something in. I'm just going to edit this to a specific number, but you don't want to do this on yours. You want to just leave the blue as a formula. That is the amount of money that I spent, which is what those columns would all total to had I put in every number. Now, remember, you have to fill out the yellow boxes. So in that same form, for the entire year, my total revenue was 755, 223. So what happens now is the 264 is my overhead expenses out of the 755 of total revenue, which means the percentage of my revenue that equals overhead was 35%. The other thing that I like, and this is normally when you think of overhead, people talk about it in a way of percentages, which is the normal traditional way to think about it. But in that year, I did 708 jobs. And what that equaled for me was, of the 708 jobs, the average cost of overhead per job was $373. But if you look at the bottom, the average dollars per event was 1,067, which is pretty good, right? So my average ticket was over $1,000. My average overhead was 373. We're going to come back to those numbers in a little bit whenever we go over this, but this is easy. Filling out this information, and then updating, and then letting this file do its own work is easy, easy, easy. Now, if let's say that you got a machine, right? Let's say that all of this is, let me just try to, if you got a machine and there is equipment somewhere on here. Inventory and equipment, right? Now, if it's a year end and you're doing this at the end of the year, you would just put the $2,000 you spend for the machine. But if you're doing this for the first quarter, which I would recommend all of you go back at the beginning of the year now, and you're going to do the first 3 months, like January, February, and March, because those 3 months are done, you should have all the numbers for those months. What you would want to do is you're going to take the total of $2,000, and I'm going to do this on my calculator on my phone. 2,000 divided by 5 years is what we said we want to get out of it. That's $400 a year. You're going to divide that by 12 months, and that's $33.3 a month. So what I'm going to do for that piece of equipment is I'm going to put, you could put 33, you could put 34, it doesn't matter. I'm going to put in $33, $34, whatever, for the first 3 months. And then when you add all of your other expenses for these 3 months, you're going to get a specific number. And then what you want is to take the total number of events that you have for those 3 months very specifically, and the amount of revenue you made for those 3 months. And then these numbers here, the blue and the percentage revenue and the average dollars per event, are going to update for you. And that is going to give you the absolute most updated overhead information that any balloon decorator has, because most people don't do this work. If you get in the habit of doing this at the end of every month, it's going to be super helpful to you so that you're going to understand your numbers on the fly, right? It's going to be really good information. Before we move on, I'm going to show you that this file has an example, and you see this one is spelled out a lot more. This is one that would look like somebody who's been keeping up with it every single month for an entire year. And this particular person has vastly different numbers, and their revenue was like almost, in this example, almost 50% of their event went towards overhead. Okay, but this will just give you an example. That's what the second page is on this. And then the third page, what I want to show you is that the 35% that is here on the percentage of revenue that's overhead automatically populates to this line here. So this blue number will populate here, and that is going to be a number that we're going to work with in a little bit to get some of our pricing. What documents do I need to prove that it was for my business? I know receipts, but do I have to have like photos of me in a meeting? If you keep really good files, that is what I would do. Document everything. But yeah, you're going to want to ask a CPA what they need to do their job. That's going to be the best thing for you. Okay, we will come back to this sheet because what we're going to do is this file here, or this page, is a job cost form on steroids. It is a crazy form that will automatically help you out in such a big way to help you get your actual selling price, or to get the selling price for your decor. But we will come back to this in a little bit. Okay, so we just covered the overhead tool and kind of how you would want to use that, and we'll come back to it in a little bit. But I want to give you guys some examples from my own business, and then I want to give you what I would consider is probably the easiest option for keeping track of your overhead, and it's super simple, which is not something people could normally say when they're talking about overhead. So on the right side, you see 2022, we averaged 59 jobs a month, and the total cost of our overhead was we spent 22 grand a month on overhead expenses. This is not labor to get jobs done. This is expenses to run the business, which is a lot, right? 22 grand a month is a lot of money to be spending. That averaged out to be $373 a job. And our average ticket was $1,067 at 35% overhead. Now, I do not have all of my taxes done for 2023, but what I do have is the number of jobs that we've done, and that was 44. And I did have the total gross revenue, which actually was less overall, but we also did a lot less jobs per month. So our average ticket went up to $1,261, and part of that's because I raised my prices. If I kept the same numbers from the overhead and realized that some of those numbers are going to change, that brings my average for 2023 to $500 a job in overhead, because I have less jobs to spread the same amount of money over, which means more, each job has to absorb more of the cost. And we'll get to that in a little bit, because that's a very interesting concept for this, for overhead as a topic. But you see my overhead percentage per job is higher in 2023. Now, at the bottom, there's an easy option. And what I would recommend if you want this to be the easiest thing in the world is use one credit card, one bank account, one whatever for all of your business expenses and transactions that you are making. And the only thing I would not put on that card or business transactions are the buying of balloons and the cost of goods sold products. And the reason for that is because those numbers do not go into your overhead number. That is the cost of the direct cost numbers. If you can have those numbers separate, so maybe use a different card when you buy balloons than you do for paying your insurance bill, paying your rent payments, paying whatever. If you can keep those separate, then what you do at the end of a period of time, if you do it on a monthly basis, all you have to do is add up the total amount of your expenses, and you can put that single number into, so in my example for 2022, that number would come up to 22 grand a month. And I would put that number in all by itself, and then for that period of time, if I was only doing 1 month, I would put in 22 grand. Let me pull this sheet right back up real quick. I would put in $22,000 here, and then the total revenue, I would put whatever that amount was that I made during that month, and the number of events would be for that same time period. So if I was only doing 1 month, I would put, I believe, 59 jobs in 2022 is what would end up being in that spot. That's a really easy way because it minimizes all the different numbers that you would need to put together, but it's the same thing. You're just kind of condensing it down to one place. Makes life easy if that's what you wanted to do. So I want to go through 3 examples that I feel like are pretty good examples for understanding the difference between where maybe some of you came into this class thinking you were, and then the reality of where you might actually be. So in example number 1, this is for our decorators who have an average of 8 jobs per month, which I feel like is it's not a bad number for a home-based business. And your overhead that you consider is probably not very much. You're counting your general liability insurance. Maybe you set some money aside for equipment, miscellaneous money, auto maintenance, your balloon guild subscription is in there, and then business licenses, tags, whatever. Basically, you're running lean and mean, and you think you don't really have very much in the way of expenses and bills. So your total is $300 a month is what you're factoring as the cost of doing business. And that would average to $38 per job, right? It doesn't sound like that big of a number. And the reality is it's not a big number, but it's also probably not a true number for most of us. So the second example is somebody who has the same number of jobs, but they do their overhead a little bit better. And then they add something that I want to kind of encourage you home-based business people to think about is they add the idea of paying themselves as a manager during this time that they're working. So they're going to give themselves $100 rent payment to rent that side room that they're using. They're going to add $50 for utilities. The only differences are the ones that are underlined. So they're paying their automotive insurance through their overhead or through their business, and they're going to pay themselves $200 a week as the manager of their company. If they do 8 jobs a month, $200 a week equals $800 a month. So it's on average, it's going to be paying themselves $100 a job as a manager. If you do that math, the number is $1,450 a month is what it costs for them to do business, which for 8 jobs averages $181 a job. So the third example, this is one that kind of gets me a little bit excited. The only difference is adding more work. Is now you've added 4 more jobs a month. And all the other numbers stay exactly the same. And yeah, this is just an example of overhead. This isn't saying it cost you $181 to do a job. It's saying the overhead cost per job is $181. So that's all that this is that I'm going over. But in example 3, you're going to add 4 more jobs. And if you look, the thing at the bottom is what changes. The amount of overhead per job goes down to $120 per job. And think of it like you have 1 scoop of butter and you put it on 1 piece of toast. And then you take that exact same size scoop and now you're spreading it over 2 pieces of toast. It's going to be thinner. The amount of butter on each piece of toast is going to be less because it's getting covered by more, it's covering more ground. So as you add more jobs, it takes your overhead cost and it splits up the amount that each job has to carry, which is good information to have when you're thinking about the kind of jobs that you want to book and the stuff that you want to do with your business. So in example 2 versus 3, we're going to take those 4 extra jobs and we're going to set them aside. Now, the person in example 3 did 12 jobs, but on the same 8, the first 8 jobs they did of the month versus the 8 jobs the other person did, the person on the right effectively had $61 per job additional profit built in if everything was charged exactly the same. And the reason is because the overhead cost per job was less. Now, that doesn't mean your bills are less. It doesn't mean if you get more jobs, you don't have to pay rent ever. What it means is the rent that you're paying is getting divided up significantly more, which is a really, really good thing. So if you want to do better at business, charging more and raising your prices is one thing that's super helpful, but another one is just to increase the volume of work. And this is basically like a life principle. You want to get better at something, you need to put in the reps. You want to get stronger, you need to go to the gym, you need to move the weights up and down. You need to do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And the more you do it, the stronger you're going to get. The more you do anything, the more reps you put in business, the better you're going to get at it. Okay, so now we're going to talk these pricing strategies, and there are 4 of them. The first one is the cost plus, and we've talked about it a little bit. The first step is to calculate the total cost to produce the product. And this is all the tangible items that you're going to have to use that cost you money. And it also requires the fixed cost, which are your overhead expenses that we just discussed. The next thing you're going to do after you have those 2 numbers is you're going to add your desired profit margin, the margin that you want to make on the job, and then it's going to give you your selling price. So it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, and we'll go through this example. Now, I'm going to tell you, we're going to go through examples later where I'm going to show you the numbers a lot more specific than I am with this one. I just want you to see how this goes so you get a good grasp on this pricing example itself. And like I said, I think a lot of us use something like this. Maybe you don't add a percentage, but maybe you add something after you figure out what it's going to cost you. So for this example, we have 11-inch balloons. We have 260s. There's 4 different kind of foil balloons on this. When we factor, what I recommend when you're factoring balloons is a 30-foot arch in my shop takes about ballpark around 250 balloons. I know that number is not divisible by 4, but it's in that ballpark. So that's how many 11-inch balloons I would factor that it takes. Now, I am never, ever, ever, ever going to think, so that is 2.5 bags of balloons. That's what I'm going to use for my numbers. No, I'm going to use a full bag for my numbers. So if I'm talking about 11-inch balloons that are not like reflex or whatever, then you're looking at $15 a bag of balloons. That's what I would charge. And in this case, I would charge for, I said 250 balloons. That means if these were assorted colors, pastels or whatever, then I would charge for 3 different bags of balloons. Charge for the entire bag. And what that does is you're not going to use the entire bag, which means you're going to gain more profit on a job that you're charging for a bag of balloons that you already have leftovers that you're using for. But either way, you have to have the balloons for this job. You have to buy them. So you might as well charge for the entire bag. So the total cost, and that includes the overhead for this example, would be a ballpark of $356 is what this company figured out this would cost them to build. They want a 40% profit margin. And that profit margin, you could do it one of 2 ways. One, you can times the cost, which is $356 in this example, times 40% gives you another number that then you're going to add back to the cost. So in this case, it gives you 142. You're going to add that to the 356, and that gives you a selling price recommended at $498. Now, you can do that, or you can say, if I'm going to add 40% to the cost of this item, it's literally the same as multiplying the cost by 140% or 1.4. If you multiply 356 times 1.4, you're going to get 498, and it kind of skips a step, makes it easier. So what that equation looks like is the direct cost plus the overhead cost times 1.4 equals your selling price. And the 0.4 comes from the profit margin that we are recommending in that example. If you want a different profit margin, then change that number. And that's up to you and your business and what makes sense. My point is, we're not throwing darts at a wall with a blindfold on. What we're doing is we are being very specific with our information, and we are coming up with numbers, and we're actually using math to do it. Now, what I would say is, in this example, if I use the cost plus to price this item out, and I just went with that price, let's say that's what I charged for this, and I put up the design and I was happy with that price, and then next time a client books this, you know what I'm not doing? All of that math all over again. I already have a price for it. Why would it be different? If I have an answer for why it would be different, such as, well, that was last year's price, this year's price is going to be up a little bit, then maybe I would figure up a different math, but I'm not going to go start all over when I've already done the beginning work. So the good thing about this is it gives you a starting point from which everything else can blossom off of. You're going to find that in the examples that we show later, most of them at least consider the cost plus as a starting point, and then either very quickly get away from it, or they use it as a baseline and then they add to it using different strategies as well. So each of these price strategies have advantages and limitations. This one is very simple. It's easy to understand. There's not a ton of math involved. And then it also guarantees that the cost of your goods are going to be recovered and that you're not going to have losses on the job itself. Your expenses are covered and profits built in. It's also a very consistent pricing strategy that, yes, you can do it for everything. I don't recommend it for everything, but you're going to see where that recommendation comes true in a second. But it is a good pricing strategy for most items as a beginning starting point, especially your classic decor items. The limitations of this is that it doesn't really consider the market demand for an item. If there's an item that's really hot and everybody's getting top dollar for it, but here you are doing cost plus, well, maybe you probably are leaving some profit on the table. Or if everybody is causing the price of the same design to go down, down, down for whatever reason, or your customers just aren't interested in it, then maybe cost plus isn't even going to help you in that circumstance as well. It could underestimate the value of what you're offering with all you do is add up the cost of the supplies and then you add a profit margin on it. But the thing that you made is incredible and amazing, more than normal, then you're leaving value on the table that you could get money for. And then the last thing is, it says that it's easy to make a mistake as a limitation. It's easy to make a mistake if you're not paying attention to what it actually cost you to do the job. It's easy to make a mistake if you don't pay attention to your overhead numbers and you're just pretty loose with those. Then you're not actually giving the real numbers for your baseline to add your percentage to. So making a mistake is just as simple as not getting all your numbers right. Okay, now the second pricing strategy is called value pricing. And I want to give you guys a story to demonstrate this one first. But the question is, you see in the answer already because something happened. But the question is, how can you determine the value of anything? How can anyone determine what something is worth, right? Here's an easy concept. A dollar is a small rectangular piece of paper, and it's got ink on it, and now they've made it where there's all these different parts to it. But the value of a dollar is not based on what it's made of. Like I could have another piece of paper that I could have another piece of paper that's twice as big. And maybe the other paper has more ink on it and more things and more stuff. But that paper may not be worth the same as a dollar, right? So the dollar is worth what people say that it is worth. So it's worth what people attribute, what someone else is willing to attribute the value for it. So if you're in the, if you've heard motivational speakers or something, you might have heard this story. So if so, it is 9:30 on my time, so hopefully you don't fall asleep. But I do want to share a little story because I feel like it's a really good one. And I feel like it says a lot to us as individual people, and it says a lot to us as businesses. And the story goes like this. Before he died, a father said to his son, "Here's a watch that your grandfather gave me before he died, and I want to give it to you now. It's almost 200 years old. But before I give it to you, I want you to take it to the local jewelry store and ask them how much they would feel that it's worth. How much would they give you for it?" So the son goes and he goes to the jewelry store and he comes back and he's like, "They said they would give me $100 because it's really old." And the father's like, "Okay, now take that same watch and go to the pawn shop down the road and find out what they would give you for it." And the son came back kind of a little bit sad and he's like, "They said they would give me $20 because it's scratched and dented and because it's so old." So then the father says, "Okay, now there's a museum on the other side of town and they're having a very specific show. I want you to take it to that museum and I want you to ask the curator what he would give you for that watch." So the kid thinks his father's crazy, but his father's on his deathbed. So he's like, "Okay, I'll do it." And he comes back excited. He's like, "Dad, the curator offered me $375,000 for this very rare piece to be included in their antique collection." And the father responded saying, "I want to show you that the right place and the right people will value you in the right way. Don't find yourself in the wrong place and get angry because you're not valued. Never stay in a place where someone doesn't see your value or you don't feel appreciated. If you don't know your value, you will always settle for far less than you deserve. People who don't know their value will always settle for less than they're worth, and this is in their relationships and in their business." So my point of that little story, and I know it's an extreme example, but there is a measure of truth to it, right? If you think about what a steak is worth, if you love steak, you might be willing to pay a lot of money for a steak. But if you're a vegan, you will not pay a single penny for a steak, no matter how good it is. So to one person, that thing has more value than it does to somebody else. So if you find yourself saying things like, "I could never charge that much for this design," then you do need to ask yourself, am I falling into the pricing pitfall of charging too much money for my services? Or could it simply be that I'm trying to sell these designs to people who don't appreciate the value of what I'm offering them? And that is a question that you do need to have answered for yourself so that you can get your prices correct. So the value is attributed to something by how much somebody's willing to pay for it. So the value-based pricing strategy is one where you're going to try to understand the perceived value that the offerings that you have, and to the clients that you're offering them to. It focuses on customer benefits. So again, perceived value is not necessarily in the things that your columns or your arches are made from. They are in the problems that these things are going to solve for your customer. Oh, you want a backdrop to cover that wall with all these pictures of a bunch of old dudes who were the Lions Club founders. And yeah, like this wall I'm going to make for you is amazing. And you will not see those pictures at all. It's going to look really good. You're starting to attribute value to the thing that you're offering to them so that you can sell it based on its value, not on, yeah, that thing is about, I could take 3 bags of balloons and put them up there and it's going to look great, right? There's a big difference. And then it also is something where you're going to have to determine the things that are going to drive the value. And it could be that it's an enhanced product. It could be that they're going to have a better outcome booking this than they would something else. Emotional satisfaction is a big driver. It could be that you can get this job done quicker than anybody else, that you're a better problem solver than other people. There are a lot of reasons that could determine the value of a thing. And then once you identify the things that drive the value, then you're going to set your prices based on those as you think that the customer is willing to pay for it. So you're going to offer your things at a premium as opposed to the job cost plus, right? And that's how you're going to sell it to your customers, which requires you communicating appropriately the value that they are going to be paying for while you're giving them the price. The other thing to consider is something that we call the replacement cost, which means that the client can book your services for an item, or they could book something else to take the place. So a good example is centerpieces. They could book your decor arrangement, or they could book flowers. And the prices that we offer to them need to be reflective of that mindset. If I'm going to offer them $100 centerpiece, is that question is it going to put the question in their mind that says, what else could I get for $100 instead of balloons on this table? And then, is the thing that I'm being offered worth $100, or would something else do the job better for that same price? Or should I get them to give me a better price than 100 because that's a lot of money for a centerpiece? But if you're like, yeah, this centerpiece has an LED screen, it's custom, blah, 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 and you have all these reasons why what you're offering them will bring the value that you're asking the price for, then maybe you have a conversation that they can have, because flowers aren't going to bring an LED screen with it because you're bringing something very unique and specific to their event. The value-based pricing strategy requires you to pay attention to the types of customers that you're speaking with, so that you know you're talking to X customers and they're going to be willing to buy X products, and that's what's going to help you set the value for them. And then finally, value pricing over time, it might change based on what else is happening in your market. It might change based on what's happening with your customers. It might change based on the fact that now you're marketing to different customers who value your services a little bit higher than somebody else. So in the example of the watch and the kid, the pawn shop is never going to pay $375 for that watch because it's not worth that to them. So if this kid is selling all his stuff to a pawn shop, but then he finds his way to sell things to other places that would be willing to give him more, then he should change his prices. He should not take $20 from the museum guy because a pawn shop is only willing to pay 20 for it, so it's not worth more than that. That's kind of the opposite direction. Now, a friend of mine named Joette had brought up an example to me a long time ago that has stuck with me. And what's crazy is, in doing this class, I actually revisited that idea very specifically for this topic. And this example in this picture, the Omni Hotel's event menu, this is from the food and catering for a local hotel that we do balloons in all the time. If you look at this, the first line says a 26% service charge plus tax, which is unavoidable, is going to be applied to all food, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're going to add 26% to the price. That blows my mind right out of the gate. That is the kind of thing that my customers who order balloons from me, this is the kind of thing that they're very used to seeing all the time. If you want your mind blown a little bit more, look at what it costs for a single gallon of cold brew coffee. $130 per gallon. Now, if you want to talk about pricing psychology, they don't even put the dollar sign on their numbers, because I don't know why they do this, but I'm almost wondering if it's like, if I don't put the dollar sign, it doesn't feel like money to people who have to pay this. But how many of you think it would be great to buy a cold brew gallon of coffee for $130? Is that something that you think you would be wanting to pay for? For me, the answer is no. That's a lot of money for coffee. Now, here's another question that I want you to answer. How many events have you ever left and people were talking about how amazing that coffee was? Like, that coffee was amazing. Like, I can't believe how it looked. I can't believe how it tasted. Like, I've never in my life heard people talking about how amazing the coffee is at an event. Now, if it's like a little, like they have a little kiosk and they're like some special coffee, whatever, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a straight up hotel situation of coffee. I've never heard that, but I have heard people talking about and taking pictures of the event, the decorations that I'm providing for them. I've not seen people showing pictures of their hotel cups of coffee at an event, but they sure do with our balloon decor, which means my balloons should be priced significantly more valuable than a gallon of coffee, right? Does that make sense at all? Like, it's bananas to me to think about even remotely considering that maybe almost any kind of balloon that I have to offer them would not be worth a gallon of coffee. So that is a kind of thing to keep in mind, is when you're considering my clients all day, every day in this hotel are looking at those prices for these items. So my prices need to be reflective of the fact that I'm way better than a gallon of coffee. And what I'm bringing to the table is going to be talked about more than the coffee. It's going to have a greater impact. It's going to be, like the thing. So when I'm communicating value to my customers, don't be afraid of the numbers. If you're talking to the right customer, the numbers aren't going to scare them because they're already used to paying high prices for a bunch of other stuff as well. Okay, now this example is one where I'm going to give you the cost plus, and then I'm going to tell you how the value price would be different. And then I'm going to tell you why this would be an example of a value-based price over the cost plus. This is like an 8-foot by 8-foot backdrop. It has a reflex Linkaloon wall behind it, and there's a boatload of foil balloons all over it. And between the latex and between the foil balloons, there is a bunch of neon rope lighting going through the whole thing. It looks amazing. I like to talk about it like a really cool looking motorcycle with ground effects. That's what it feels like to me. And it looks better in person than it does even in a photo. So if I were to cost plus this out, the total cost counting overhead would be $612.50. If I desired a 40% profit margin, then that would give me $245. That would mean the total selling price for just the cost plus would cost me $860. Now, or would be sold at $860. Now, I don't know how many items you guys build that will cost you $613 to build it. And that doesn't count what you're charging for it. But an item that cost me that much to build has to be amazing. because that's a lot of money to put into an item that you're building for a client. And to me, 40% profit margin on top of that just doesn't really cut it. So I would look at the cost plus for this and say $860 is like letting somebody steal from you. Like it's a steal for them, and you're the one letting them steal it from you. So I would not want to do this for less than like 1750, $1,900, somewhere in that ballpark. So for me, what I would want to charge them would be almost twice what the cost plus would be. And the reason would be because I feel like that's what its value would be to the customer. I feel like what you're looking for is not just a balloon wall. We have balloon walls, this is their price. And even a regular Linkaloon wall would be, it probably would be closer to the cost plus pricing if it was a standard wall. But if it's an organic wall, now it's going to be more. And this is like an organic wall on steroids, and then some. So the value my customer is getting for this design should be significantly more, and the price that they're given should be relative to the value that you're attributing to it. This thing's amazing, and it looks amazing, and people talk about it all day, every day. So this would be an example where cost plus is leaving money on the table. Your value pricing would not. So the advantage is that it maximizes profitability. Your costs to do this job are going to be the same whether you use cost plus or whether you use a value-based price. But the profit, if I was able to charge, even if I charged $1,750 for this, that's $900 more than cost plus. And there's already $245 of profit built in. So the difference in profit is between $245 and $1,200, right? That's a pretty big difference in profit on this one item. So the other thing is that it reflects your customer's preference. It's weird to me, but if I charged less money for some of the items that I make, if my customers didn't know me and I was trying to get them as a customer, and I charged way less, they would assume I don't know what I'm doing, because I'm charging prices that aren't even worth a pot of coffee, or I'm charging prices that are way less than everybody else. And I'm charging, so they would assume my lack of pricing skills also equals a lack of trust, a lack of quality, a lack of other items that they want their businesses to have. So we had a guild member give us this example, and it was something that happened already in the past. He said that he lost a job because the prices he quoted were way under his competitors' pricing. And because of that, he didn't get the job. Because his customer attributes a higher price with higher quality. Those are the kind of customers that I want. So you're giving the customer the comfort and the satisfaction knowing I paid really good money for this. It's going to be awesome. Just because you're pricing your decor in such a way that gives them that comfort. This is a strategy that works best on differentiated products. So it doesn't work so well on the same column that everybody can build, but it works really well on unique items, items that are more upscale, items that bring something to the table that maybe they don't get with other different decor items. The limitations of this is that it is subjective. You can throw out a price to your customer and they can just say, oh, well, no, like I would pay this for it. And now you have a decision to make. Am I willing to do it for less? But at least you've given them a starting point to negotiate with. You could get it wrong. You could say, let's say my customer's willing to pay $1,900 for this, but I'm like, ooh, job cost would be $860. I would take like $1,200. Your customer might say yes, but they would have also said yes to $1,900. So you could underestimate the value yourself by not charging more. So because it's subjective, you could get the price wrong yourself. And then the last one is that it requires your customers saying yes. The market has to be able to accept that and that as a price for that kind of an item. Okay, I've kind of hinted at this one as not really the best pricing strategy. Isabel, we're going to get to that because I have examples in a little bit. Your question was, what pricing structure do you suggest for things we've never done? We're going to get to that question for sure when we get to the specific examples. Okay, competitive pricing strategy requires you to understand your market. You have to know your competitors, the pricing strategies, their customers that they're selling to. It allows you to have what its term is a benchmark that determines your pricing strategy. So it's giving you something to base your prices on. But again, it's not really the thing I would want to base it on because you're basing your prices off of someone else's prices. And then it does allow for price matching or price leadership. Now, price matching is an example is Party People Events has a catalog with all of our prices on our website. You could go to it today and you could copy every one of those prices and put it in your own personal catalog. You could put it on all of your items, whatever. That would be your choice to do. And I would tell you that it would be lazy and it would be dumb. But you could do that. And competitive pricing strategy, if you used it as a strategy, that's what it would do potentially. It also is a way where you could decide to be what they consider as price leadership. Now, leadership doesn't mean you're charging more, although it can. You could say, well, that's what they're charging. I'm going to charge more because I want my customers to know that I'm better. And one way to show that is that my prices are higher, which again, doesn't sound like that should make sense, but that's the way it is. You could choose to do that, or you could lead them on the downward spiral to nothingness by charging less and undercutting the market. In order to use this strategy, you have to monitor your competitors' prices all the time. You have to know, are they doing something different? Are they having a sale, a discount? And then this would potentially push you to what's going to make you different. If you're matching their decor and you're matching their prices, why would somebody book you over them? What are you doing better? What are you doing more? What value are you bringing to the table that they're not to get a customer to contact you instead of them? And then the other thing is it will lead to price wars and strategy adjustments. Generally a price war to the bottom where everybody's undercutting each other and it's going to erode your business and your profit margins. The way I think about this is if I ever, there's a guy who sees a girl and this girl has a boyfriend and this dude talks her into cheating on her boyfriend with him. She ends up breaking up with her boyfriend to be with this dude. In what world does this guy think it's not going to happen to him too? So if I undercut another business and I get customers who come to me because my prices are lower, which in their mind is more attractive, what's going to happen when that other business, all they have to do is just lower their prices? And now that same customer that came to me has zero loyalty to me. They only have a loyalty to a low price. Then they're going to go to right back to the other business. It's not a really great pricing strategy. So I kind of just talked about that. A competitor lowers their prices. Now you're going to lower yours too. And it's this back and forth thing of just trying to beat each other out. It doesn't make any sense. What does make sense and where this strategy has some benefits to it, I guess we'll get into it here. Advantages of it is that it can make you relevant in the market. I feel like even though this is listed as an advantage, if you're to remain competitive and relevant, potentially your relevance is going to be the simple fact that you're in the same ballpark as everybody else. If you're matching their prices exactly, then I don't feel like that person's relevant at all. But where this does have the advantage is doing the research to find out what everybody else is doing. And I would not recommend doing this in some unethical way where you're going to be, um, shady, like calling them like you're a customer, wasting their time, getting all kind of prices. But if you're around your competitors, who I don't have competitors, I have friends who have the same kind of business as I do in my area. But sometimes the conversation comes up, hey, what do you guys charge for? I saw you do that arch. I've never really done one like that. What are you guys getting for that? And then they give me the number. Now, let's say I was doing that kind of arch, and I'm like, what are you guys getting for that? If their number is way different than mine, then maybe I would consider why that is. I'm not just going to match their number, but it would be information that I take in. And if you remember about confidence in your pricing, what I talked about is a lack of confidence is usually an abundance of ignorance, but a lack of ignorance will make you more confident. So if I get more information and I'm losing my ignorance on a subject, I can be more confident in my pricing. So I'm getting information when I find out what everybody else charges. So if I'm asking people like what they charge for a thing, it's not because I want to match their price. It's because I want to know, am I in the same ballpark as them? Customer attraction is listed as an advantage, and you will get more customers if you're cheaper than everybody else. And if your marketing is good and people know that you're cheaper. The problem is the customers that you're going to get are cheap customers, and they are going to work you more than you will your better, higher level corporate customers who have bigger budgets and less concern. A person who only has $200 to spend is going to try to get every little dime squeezed out of that 200 bucks, and they're going to want to know all the way around what are they getting for their money. But if a corporate customer tells you, look, I have a $2,000 budget, I want an entrance design, I want something behind the DJ, and I want this stuff in this, I want a photo op right here. What do you have for that? They're going to let you come up with the items that you're offering to them. Maybe they'll give you some direction, and then they're going to leave you alone and let you do it. They're not going to be back and forth all the time about every little crazy detail unless the customers that they're working with require them to do that. Flexibility. It's listed as an advantage, but I don't see what's flexible about it when you're just matching somebody else's pricing. I guess the flexibility is that you can change your prices. If this is your strategy, you have to be flexible because other people are determining what your prices are. The limitations, which are all across the board. Profit margin pressure, the lower you charge, the less profit that you're getting out of your items. Commoditization, which is just a fancy word of saying, in order for me to charge the same price as my competitor, I have to be able to make the same thing that they're making. And then everybody's the same, everybody's charging the same price. There's really nothing different about us. And it limits differentiation, which is the opposite of that, is it limits your ability to add value. It limits your ability to be set apart because you don't have the money to do it. So if my profit margin is very, very small, I don't have the extra time and the extra ability to go above and beyond with every single customer because I'm going to lose money if that's what I do all the time. All right. The last pricing strategy is called instinctive pricing strategy, or you heard me refer to it as your gut pricing. Now, this one is one that I like because once you start doing this and you see that it works on specific items, it just feels good. This is one where you are letting your experience and your personal thoughts and emotions influence the price. It is very subjective, and you're using your own subjectivity to determine the price, not necessarily what you think the value to them is. You're not really doing a lot of research. You're not really doing much of anything to come up with this price other than setting a price that makes you feel good. And then you throw it to your customer and they can come back to you as they want. The more experienced you are, the better you will get at this pricing strategy. So this specific picture is something a customer gave us another picture and said, we want something like this. And it was similar to what I gave them. And the job was like 3.5 hours away. And I looked at the picture and well, how big do you want it? And here's the thought. You guys, if we wanted to cost plus this out, it is a organic cloud of latex, reflex balloons, and then I added an insane amount of metallic spheres all over it, all different sizes. And then there's a whole mess of tinsel curtain to hide the poles. Basically, that's just to hide the poles that are holding it up. How do you figure something like this out? You could spend 20, 30, 60 minutes trying to do math. You're going to have to say, well, man, this is going to require a piece of garland that maybe is like, in order to get this cloud that's going to be 10 foot around, I'm going to have to figure, like, even thinking about how to figure up the numbers gives me a headache. And it's just not something that I really wanted to do. So my office manager said, what if we just tell them $3,000? And I said, that number sounds pretty good to me. If they say yes, I'm happy to do it for $3,000. We don't have to waste any time thinking about this job. We don't have to waste any time figuring up anything. We don't have to waste time doing math. We don't have to waste any of that time. Now, because this job was also 2.5 hours away, we also had a pretty hefty delivery fee, which we will get into later, talking about delivery fees as a specific line item that you're going to figure up once, and then you're just going to use that for every event. But in this case, the total came to about $5,000 for this item delivered, installed, and taken down. And then they said yes, and then they said yes to it 3 times in a 2-week period. And what's really crazy is when I took this bad boy down, I took it apart, and then when I put it back up, I used the same damn thing again, and I put it back together, and I added more balloons and I spruced it up a little bit, but I literally paid very, very, very little money the second time and very, very little money the third time in product because I reused the same ones. Now, some of the foil balloons died. I had to replace them, but it wasn't very much at all. So the cost plus, first of all, would be a nightmare and a headache to figure out. And it's something I just didn't. What if the client said no and they're like, oh, well, we only have like $1,000 budget? Well, we're not talking about the same item then, are we? We're talking about now you're asking me, what can I give you for $1,000? This is the look we wanted, but we only have $1,000. That is a problem that I'm willing to go do some math for because I have better numbers. But you throwing a picture at me without a budget, without any more information, you're asking me to do work that I don't want to do until I know that you're serious about it. And I don't even want to figure out how to do this until I know that I'm going to get a price that makes me happy. So when you get asked to build something and you send this really crazy picture, you could take all the time you want to figure it out. You can get back to your client and you can say, well, based on my calculations, this should be what, I mean, we don't talk that way, but that's how you could figure it out. Or you could just say, I don't really want to build a 10-foot tall tractor. with dirt pouring out of the thing. I don't want to build that at all. It doesn't make me jazzed up to think about building it. But if you're going to pay me $3,000, now I'm happy to do it. Right. So that's what I love about this strategy is this is a number that makes me feel good. And every time a client says yes to that number, it's almost like there's this little internal party like, yay, I get to do this really cool job now. And the client's going to pay this crazy amount of money for this job. They don't always say yes. Sometimes they'll come back to you with a different price, or now they figured out what budget they have. And at that point, you can start figuring stuff out with them. And you can say, well, I would have done that for $3,000. If you only have a $2,000 budget, why don't I tweak it this way and that way? And it is going to look amazing. And I'll do this for $2,000. And you're bringing down what, I mean, you have options is what I'm saying, but it's a starting point that you feel good about working from. And it doesn't require a lot of figuring out anything. You're not doing a lot of math to figure out any of your numbers. So the advantages is that it's a very quick decision-making process. It can typically be long enough for you to decide you don't want to think about it, and then long enough for you to decide what amount of money will make you want to think about it, and that's how quick it can be to give them a price. There's flexibility in this because you could give them a price and then start having to negotiate with them. And then it's a very personalized approach. The limitations is that it's very subjective. You could give them a price and there's like, oh, no, I guess we're not talking about this job at all because that's nowhere near what I have for this. So let's figure out something else. The risk for error. Now, maybe my client would have been willing to pay even more for that. I don't actually know. I also know that I don't care because I was satisfied with what I charged them for it. And then you can't scale a business throwing numbers out from your gut for every item that you have. So this isn't for how much do you charge for a classic balloon column. This is how much do you charge for this weird item that is hard for us all to figure out, right? Okay, so we're going to take another break. And then when I come back, we are going to be in the home stretch where we have some examples. Okay, so we've learned 4 different strategies. We've looked at a lot of different options, and I want to show you how we're going to put some of them together in some realistic examples. So just as a little reminder, cost plus strategy is you take your direct cost and your fixed cost or your overhead, and that equals the total cost that you're paying in order to get a job done. And then you're adding the profit margin to that, and that gives you the selling price. So this is an example where I just kind of want to run through some numbers and show you guys where some of these numbers might influence your pricing. Before I do that, I mentioned to you about, you haven't heard me talk about delivery or takedown fees at all. Technically, a delivery fee could be rolled into the direct cost because it is job specific. Every job you do, you're going to have to get in a vehicle, drive to the place, which means that you're going to use gas, you're going to have labor cost, and then the overhead part of that would be the vehicle maintenance and repairs and stuff. But I don't want to figure up that on every single job because it would be a huge pain. So my recommendation for you is get a half-hour space from everywhere that, a half-hour delivery time, and figure out how many miles is that, how far can you get in a half hour? If you have 1 employee in a half hour, a round trip would be 1 hour. So 1 hour of labor for an employee. A lot of times I send 2 people, so I'm going to base my pricing on 2 people. So that's 2 labor hours for that area. And then let's say that I'm getting 20 miles. So round trip, that's 40 miles. I'm going to say 2 gallons of gas. I'm going to round it up to $5 a gallon. So I'm looking at $10 in gas, 2 man hours at $25 a piece. That's $50. So anywhere within a half hour, just to cover your cost would be a ballpark of $60. Now, the thing that I want you to be aware of is this isn't numbers that I'm making up as though they're not real. Like, I am paying this money in order to deliver this job. So if I only charge $60, what happens if I have to have 3 people go to that job? Then I probably need to consider that my numbers need to change for my delivery fee for this event. Or what happens if it's farther, right? So you start with a half hour, and then you're going to go to the next area outside of that one. Now, where can I go within an hour? And you're going to figure up your numbers the same. So the way that we do our delivery fees, they are based on locations. For me to get to this location is going to cost my client X amount of dollars. For me to get to that location is going to cost me X amount of dollars. For me to get somewhere closer, like I have different delivery fees based on where I'm going. And then my takedown fees are also the same based on where I'm going. You can change them based on the time of the day. If somebody's asking you to get up really early, to stay up really late, whatever. But in all of my pricing strategies, delivery and takedown fees are always a line item that's added on to everything. And they're not a factor for what I'm charging for my decor. Because it doesn't matter what I'm delivering to you, I'm still doing the same delivery, whether I'm delivering to you 1 ice cream column or whether I'm delivering 2. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now, for this example, you can look at the numbers in these boxes. The total direct cost would be a ballpark of $119 when you factor labor, accessories, balloons. Now, if you remember what I had put into my numbers for Party People event, my overhead per job was $373. Now, this is where, depending on how you use overhead, your numbers are going to be all kind of different and kind of weird. Because my percentage of overhead was, I think it was 35%. Let me see real quick. My percentage was 35%. So if I were to use 35% in this equation, what that would look like is my selling price, which I don't know the number of, equals 40% profit plus 35% overhead plus my direct cost of $119. So I have an equation where I only know one number and I know 2 percentages, and now I have to start. You see where that can be really confusing? And I like math a lot. I mean, it's kind of fun. I could figure up that. I could use that equation and figure it up, and then I could get an answer. And if I'm being super honest with you, that answer is going to be wildly different than $373 for this example. I'm putting the 373 in here on purpose because I kind of want to show you, I just want to show you that number and how it affects the way that I think about this job and the way I think about all kind of jobs. Melissa asked, what percentage of profit do you recommend? I put 40 in all these examples, not because I feel like it's just a really great big number, because that's a number that builds in room for you to succeed. It builds in room for you to get something wrong and still have probably not ruin your job. 40% profit margin, there's nothing wrong with that number at all. Okay, now the example that I'm using on the bottom is the person who has 8 jobs a month and makes $200 a week as the manager. You're gonna see why I brought that one in. This would be example number 2 from my 3 examples earlier. Their overhead per job was $181, which means their total cost would be $300 for these two items put together. So now you can see where, to me, things get a little bit crazy, because my suggested selling price using the cost plus would be $689, not counting delivery and takedown. I would love to tell you that I have customers who are willing to pay that for this design, and I would be a big fat liar because I don't. So then the question is this a job that I would take, knowing that if I'm using the math the way that I am, that I'm going to technically be losing money on this, thinking about the numbers the way that I do? I'll answer that in a minute, but I just want you to keep in mind, this is the kind of way that I think about some of these jobs, right? The example on the bottom part for this person, their profit margin would be $120, which is 40% of 300. Their selling price would be $420. So again, that might be a little bit higher than what you could sell this design for, but it's definitely a lot closer to the realm of reason. So this is stuff where you can start factoring, and you have things that are going to influence your decision. If you use the overhead percentage, then you're going to get different numbers. So that's why I'm kind of showing you two ways. Here's the deal. This number for me, knowing that I cannot sell this for 690 bucks, what that means is I better be doing other kinds of jobs on the regular basis that are going to be more profitable for my company than this particular job. If all I'm doing is this kind of job, and I'm not doing more of these jobs than I was doing of the other jobs, then I am losing money. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. If I do the same number of jobs and I have the same amount of overhead, but my average job was $400 instead of the $1,200 or $1,000 or whatever it was, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today, because I would be working a different job, because I would have gone under. So if you find yourself booking a bunch of jobs where when you do the numbers for them, you realize, man, this really isn't as profitable as I thought it was, you need to ask yourself why. Why is it not profitable? In this case, for me, the lack of profit has nothing to do with the cost to get the job done. It has everything to do with overhead. And what that means is, if this was the only kind of job I ever got, I don't need to work out of a shop to send ice cream cones out the door every day. I can build that in my house. I don't need a shop for that. I don't need 4 employees in my shop building ice cream cones every day. Like, I don't need the overhead expenses that I have now if this was the only kind of job that I got. So what that would mean is I would be made very aware something has to change, and it's a good thing to be made aware of that before you have to close the doors because you're failing and you don't even know why. You just have no idea why you're not making money when you're doing jobs all the time. I could go broke doing this job every day if nothing else changed in my business, right? And that's a really crazy thought to have. And it's a thought that I don't want for you guys to have, right? So you have to be really careful when you add anything to your business that's going to affect your overhead. Okay, now the example below, what I want to show you, and here's the real thing. Nobody cares really about any of these numbers without the real concern is how much money are you actually going to make on a job that you sold for $420, right? So let's be honest. Let's say you can't sell this ice cream cone and this helium cluster for 420 bucks. You could sell a different design for $420 that probably will not cost you very much more money than this one to make, right? It's just going to be a different design. You could sell an arch, and the cost of what it's going to take for you to build it will not be very much different. but you could sell an arch for $420. So let's just pretend whatever job you're doing, the costs are relatively the same, your overhead is the same. How much money are you going to make from that job? And it starts, an estimation for this particular job is 2 hours of labor. You see $16 an hour. I factor 25 an hour when I'm factoring it to the price. But what I factor for the owner to take home is minus taxes, right? So ballpark $32 is what you're going to make as the employee who builds it. You could also consider taking that money and paying someone else to build it. And now you have 2 hours of your life back, and it's only going to cost you $32. The profit for this design, if you remember from our example, is down here at the bottom, $120. As a single owner of a company, that profit is yours. Now, you can put that in your own bank account, but I definitely would recommend reinvesting some of that money into your business. In this example, I'm going to pretend like you're taking this money because this is technically money that you're making on this job. And then, if you remember, this is why I really recommend you guys to start paying yourself as a manager of your company. Does it increase your overhead expense? It does, but it puts you in the realm of something much more realistic to a business that's going to stick around. If you do 8 jobs a month and you make $800 a month as a manager, you're paying yourself $100 a job. So the take-home pay for you is $32 in labor, $120 in profit, $100 as the office manager. So from a $420 job, your take-home pay is $252. Does that leave you wiggle room to maybe sell this for $350 instead of $420? That would be dropping your profit by $70, right? So instead of taking home $252, you would be bringing home $180 out of a $350 job. That's still pretty good, in my opinion. Now, what I really like about building, you see how we're building numbers into your business that are as though you're paying somebody else. So I'm paying somebody to build this ice cream cone. It just happens to be me. I'm paying somebody to run my office. It just happens to be me. You could take that money and give it to somebody else, and now your time is freed up to do other things for your business that are profitable and successful. And this is how you bring on employees, because your designs are priced in such a way that an employee doing the work is already factored into the price. And when you would do that would be when you have a better use for your time than spending 2 hours building an ice cream cone. So when I price hours of labor to my customers, I usually will go $25 or $30 an hour of labor to my customers. And that's not what I pay my employees, but that's what I charge my customers when I have to start thinking about labor in that example. Okay, I have a few tips for saving time and maximizing profit. Then we're going to get to the real nerdy stuff. I call this tip shopping a price. So shopping a price is when I'm bringing a new item into our company and I have no idea what I want to charge for it. I go with intuitive pricing as the starting point, and I decide what would I like to charge for it. And it depends on what it is. An example, this is a real life example for right now, is I have a wall coming in that is being built by somebody that is going to be an LED balloon wall. I've never seen this thing. I don't think other people do it because I've never seen it. It doesn't exist on the market. This is somebody that I saw make a video. I contacted him direct. He's building this for me. I think he's only built 2 or 3 of them for other people. And the one he's building for me is twice as big as what he normally builds for anybody else. So I know I'm getting an item that is super unique. one of a kind, and I know that it's better than a balloon wall, but it's not as good as a tried and true high definition LED wall. So my price should be somewhere between those two things. I found out it's going to cost me, which I've already paid, $1,650 to buy this wall. So I have event planners that I work with on a regular basis. I trust them to give me truthful answers. And I took a video that this guy sent to me and I sent it to them and I asked them, if I got this wall, do you think you could sell it to your clients for like 1950? Again, I don't want to say 2000. 1950 is a better price point because of pricing psychology. Do you think you could sell it for 1950? They're like, yeah, can you have it next week? And the answer was no, unfortunately. But I could have already sold this design to a customer before I even got the design. I hadn't even paid for it yet. But I already had my customers telling me, yes, I can sell that all day. That thing's amazing. Yes, we want you to get it. We'll be happy to rent it from you. Um, that is what I call shopping a price. They could have come back to us and said, I could probably sell it for like $1,500. And then I would have had to, I'd had to make a decision. Well, is that what I'm interested in? The answer would still be yes. I'm only paying $1,650 for it. So yeah, $1,500 would be a good price as well. But I'd rather have $1,950. So you can get your best customers to give you pricing ideas. Because I could have went to them and asked them, I don't have any idea what to price this as. To be honest with you, I don't really want to go to my customers telling them I don't know stuff. I don't act like I know everything, but I don't want them to think I'm ignorant of even a starting point. But I could say, I'm not sure what we would charge for this. What ballpark do you think this is something you could sell to your customers? And then they can start giving you numbers back. You could get your price, but what am I doing? I'm educating myself about my customers so that I can get my pricing in such a way that's going to make them happy. And if they're the one dictating the price to you, then you know they're going to buy it from you because they've already told you they would, right? So that is one tip for getting better prices. Another one is having someone else do your invoicing for you, having someone else do your sales. I've already talked about how we as people have a hard time selling products that we wouldn't pay the money that we're trying to buy that we're trying to get for them, right? What I am very good at doing is telling my office person what I want for the designs that I'm coming up with. And then she doesn't have the authority to change that information. So when she's giving prices to our customers, she's giving the prices that I've given to her to give to them. She knows what wiggle room I've allowed her to have with pricing, but she's never going to be going crazy off the reservation on prices because it's not her place to do. She's not going to feel bad about the prices because it's not her place to feel anything about it. It's her job to get clients to say yes to the prices that I'm giving her for the designs. And she does a better job at that than me. She's not going to be giving people discounts all the time because she feels some sort of way about what our prices are. All right, this is a good one. And this one is like a multiple tips in one. Does this take time for you to create? Yes. I paid my office person, her name is Megan. She created this calendar or this catalog, and it's amazing. It's like 60 pages and has all kinds of stuff in it. Now, there's a lot of stuff we can do that's not in the catalog. But what I love about the catalog is if a customer comes to us and they give you that great question, how much are your balloons? Feels like a really dumb question, but here's my answer. We have a catalog online. I'll send them a link to the catalog. I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for, but you can browse our catalog and it will give you a general ballpark of the items that we can make and the relative price for each one. Now, if that customer looks at our catalog and they call us back, do you think that I'm going to have a really hard time making a sale with that customer? The answer is no, because they've already seen our prices and they're talking to us anyways, which means I'm not wasting a lot of time and I'm not wasting a lot of energy and I'm not wasting a lot of money paying my office people to talk to people who weren't going to end up booking with us. So get a catalog, have your prices in some way, shape, or form, even if it's even if it is a catalog or even if it's a price sheet for neon balloon decor or glow party, and you have a pricing sheet for those types of items. Make pricing sheets, make them based on themes, make them based on all kind of different items. That way it minimizes the back and forth. The other thing that I like about a catalog is if we're doing a job or we get asked to do a job and it's something that we don't normally do, but it kind of looks like something we have in our catalog, then I can go to my catalog and say, well, this design is kind of like this one, and this is what we charge for this one. So it makes pricing this other one easier because I have a reference point to go off of. So your prices need to be written down. And here's the cool thing is make your catalog. You only have to do it once, and then you just have to update the prices as you go. But make a catalog, get your prices in writing somewhere, put them in QuickBooks, again, you're going to sell what you show. So add prices to pictures. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Another tip that I have, I just kind of mentioned it a little bit, is use your past work and your past pricing and the way that you felt about that pricing. Use all of that information to influence new prices. So the job on the top left I did a long time ago. It's a totally different kind of wall than the one on the bottom left. The one on the top left is a square pack column wall, bunch of columns put together. The one on the bottom left is a Linkaloon wall, but it still has the waves. It's the same idea-ish. So we're going to get to this one as an example later, but it influenced the price that I gave on the wall on the bottom left, which in turn influenced the wall that's on the right, which what you're seeing on the right is it's a mock-up. That's why it kind of has scribble scrabble on it and why it looks like it's a big mess. But it was a mock-up that we gave to a client based on previous work. So you're going to see later how I used one price to influence the other price. Alrighty. Now, if you guys are ready for the slightly more nerdy part of this, we're going to have, I believe I have 4 examples that are going to kind of range across the spectrum on what style of pricing you would use in order to book this. And I want to get as nitty gritty as I can, right? When I first started doing this, I was like, well, we charge $455 for our arches, and that's why the price is that. But that doesn't help you at all. It literally is the opposite of what I was saying. I just gave you my price. That doesn't help you. So what I wanted to do was kind of back it up a little bit, and I want to go into a little bit of detail with this pricing tool. And I do have some of my own examples that I'm going to use from this other sheet that I've done. So I'm going to go back so you can just get a look at this picture one more time. We have a 30-foot arch. It's 4 colors. We have happy birthday, happy 60th birthday in megaloons. And then we have these column wraps, which are approximately 11 rows tall, around 10 balloons around. And remember, I was basing this off of guessing because I've never done these column wraps before. So that was kind of an influencing factor in where my prices were what they were. So on this sheet, I'm going to the interactive pricing tool. And you can put information up here if you want. For this example, I don't really care. What I would put in is the arch the balloons on the arch. Remember what I said, a 30-foot arch for me is a ballpark of 250 balloons, but there's 4 colors, which means I need 4 bags of balloons. And I'm gonna average those at $15 a bag. For the arch, I'm gonna use 3 pieces of PVC that cost me about $10 a piece. That's pretty much, now I know that there are bases, and again, I'm not saying that they're not a factor. I've had these bases for a very long time. I'm getting them back. They don't really cost me anything anymore. You can think about the overhead on those has been paid. I'm not buying new bases anytime soon. I have no reason to include them in this pricing at all. So what I'm going to do though is the column wraps are going to also use columns are going to use balloons, and if they are 11 rows tall, 10 balloons around, that is 110 balloons per column, which means 4 columns is going to be more than 4 bags of balloons. That said, I'm going to have a lot of balloons left over from the arch that it's part of the same job, but I am going to need 1 more bag of each color. So this job is going to require me to have 8 bags of balloons. And then the megaloons, there were 13 of them that are $5 a piece. So I'm putting this information in. That means the total cost of materials for this job is $215. The labor on this job, I factor at $25 an hour, and we're going to say this job took 4 hours of labor time, right? That means it took us approximately 2 hours to accomplish this job, building everything. Realistically, it probably took us a little bit longer, but so let's say 300 hours. Okay, now the labor cost is $125. The direct cost of materials, $215. Other expenses, I don't have them. So the direct cost of this job are $215 plus $125 was $340. Now, if you remember, the overhead percentage for me is 35%. That number comes from the first page that talked about the percentage of my revenue that was overhead was 35%. Because this is a form that does all this math for you, that makes this a little bit easier to work with, right? If I want my profit margin to be 40%, I'm going to put that in there and it's going to change all the numbers. So what this means is if profit is 40% and my overhead is 35%, then the number that represents my direct cost is going to be the remaining amount, which would be where this 25% comes from. So this is the math. 340 equals 25% of whatever the total cost of the job is. Then you figure out the total cost of the job. Now, if you were doing this math on your own with a calculator, now I have the total cost of the job, which would be $1359.52. Now I can say times 35%. Now I'm figuring out what my overhead cost is. And now I can times it by 40%, and I can get my profit on this particular job. So here's what's interesting. If you remember the ice cream cone job, the overhead on that job was so much for me that it made that job not profitable. If I used a percentage, the overhead on that particular job would have been significantly lower, whereas the percentage on this job, because it's a bigger job, the overhead percentages, it brings the number up above the 373. So you do have 2 ways of looking at overhead. I like to just keep them both in mind. I will do that ice cream job all day, every day, as long as it's not the only kind of job that I'm getting. My average ticket was over $1,000. That ice cream job was nowhere close to that. I need the big jobs to stay in business the way that we do. But it's also the reason why I have the overhead that I do is because we're getting the big jobs. So once I put in my numbers, you guys see immediately that it puts the suggested selling price in here for me. You see how easy that is to figure up? Did I go into any detail about how much do I charge for an arch or how much do I charge for any of those other things? All I did was figured out how many balloons this job's going to take. I gave myself an estimation on how long it was going to take, and it gave me the numbers. Now, what I will tell you is that is effectively your cost plus price, suggested selling price. My prices for that job, I actually sold that job for $1,712, which means I made $352 more than what the cost plus recommended. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why did you charge more for that than what cost plus recommended? And the reason is this: I've never done those kind of column wraps before, and it's a very specific design that I had to figure out, for one. Two, it's a very specific design that just looks cool. It's a unique thing, and I wanted to charge more for it. And I felt like in order to do it, the client was going to have to pay more for it. When I factored up these prices, I based those on, you got to have numbers coming from somewhere. So I said, what if we charge $2 per 11-inch balloon on each of these column wraps? We're estimating each of these wraps are going to have 110 balloons. $2 per balloon puts each of those wraps at $220. How do I feel about that? If I'm okay with that price, then that was the price that we set for that design, which is what we did. Now, that also gives me a precedent to work on for future pricing, because that worked for us for this design, and it can work in the future for more that are just like it. Our prices for our arch are, I believe this arch we were at $455. These are prices that started with information somewhere for me, and then over time, my prices go up. So my price of $455 started at a price that could have been like $8 per foot kind of price. And then as I raise my price, I don't really care the dollars per foot. I just care about the price for it because it's a classic design element, or something of that nature. My megaloons, I think we charge like $29 per megaloon, something to that effect, right? However, you guys see in how easy this sheet is to do. The hardest part of this, honestly, was I don't have any idea what I paid for PVC. I had to actually look it up because I haven't bought PVC in a while, and I just didn't remember. It's like $10 a pipe, which I feel like is more than it used to be, but I don't know. It's been a while. So once you know what your items cost and you're doing a job that you're not sure of how to price out, your cost plus is a really good starting point. And you can look, the cost plus on this job gave you $540 of profit and a selling price of of almost $1,400. Now, remember one of the pitfalls that talks about lacking confidence in your pricing. If you did this math and it's based on these numbers that you have, these are real legit numbers for my business. This is a number that I could go to my customer and I could think a minimum that they should be paying for this is $1,400. And I feel like because of those column wraps that it's a little weird. I feel like I want more. Like I would almost want an extra $100 per column or something to that effect. So I would be able to give them that price confidently because it's built on information that I have come up with reasons. They're not just random numbers that are thrown out there from nowhere, right? You guys understand, like, this is knowledge that I'm taking to give you a price. So I can have confidence in that price all day. The other thing I could say is if my client said, oh, well, my budget is $1,250, I don't have $1,359. Here's what I would do in that example. I would say, okay, well, maybe we can come up with column wraps that maybe aren't quite as big. And that's really all I need to do. Like, I just need to tweak your design a little bit because your budget's pretty close. Or what, and I would have done that because honestly, I still would have wanted to charge more than the cost plus for this. But let's just pretend like the cost plus price was perfect. There's a lot of P's in there. Let's just say that that was a perfect price, and the client's like, oh, I'm like $100 shy of that. Remember what I told you? My client gives me $1,000. They're going to get 1,100 in return. That $100 that I'm giving to them, how much money does that $100 literally cost me in materials and labor? Not even 25 bucks. I'm talking like less than $10 probably. If I were to get back that $100 and recover it, it is very, very little amount of money that it's going to cost me. So I could say, you know what? I would actually have this conversation with the client to get within your budget. We could make the columns a little bit smaller and that could do it. But if I'm being honest with you, I love our design. I really think this is going to look amazing. And I just want you to have it. So if your budget's $1,250, and again, I'm only saying this if the cost plus price was a number that I was happy with. If your budget's $1,250, it's $100 off. You know what? I would be more than happy to give that to you because I'm excited for you. I'm excited to do this job. I think it's a great thing. Whatever. You know what I mean? So for me, now I get to be the good guy. And what did I just do? It feels to my customer like I literally just gave them $100. And I gave them $100 in value, but it didn't cost me $100 to give that to them. So that is where you guys have some wiggle room in your pricing to be the good guy, and it doesn't cost you a lot to do it. My point in this exercise specifically was how easy did this look easy, or did it look kind of like a big complicated mess? Patty, the answer is yes. None of these prices include delivery fees. Those delivery fees were in addition, and they are on the invoice. I'm just not using them for these examples because they're almost a non-issue for this. But this, I mean, I cannot make this any easier for you guys to price your decor. And pricing is usually a big complicated mess often. And this tool that John Fudge has created is amazing. And I hope you guys use it. And I want to hear you use it when you're in the guild chatting with everybody. Talk about how easy this was to book this crazy job, and how I want to hear, like, you know, my first reaction would have been I would have charged like 700 for this, but then I did the work and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would have been way undercharging. And now we charge this and the client said yes, and we're making all this crazy extra money and we're doing it the right way, right? You guys see how a business who's getting this stuff wrong isn't going to last, because they're not factoring all these extra expenses and they're not charging what they need to charge. Okay, this example is a really cool example because I'm very proud of this wall. It is my own design. I call it the Supernova because it's just a cool name for a cool design. Now, effectively what this wall is an 8-foot by 12-foot Linkaloon, reflex Linkaloon wall. And then if you guys remember that picture I showed earlier, I love LED rope lights mixed with metal, right? So foil magic stars, foil spheres, and there's a lot of them. Now, I could take the time and start counting all of the stuff that's on this design to give you a cost plus price for it. It actually took me a little while to do, but just so you know, I did that only for this example, and I'm going to tell you it is not what I would do in reality. But for the example, I'm going to throw numbers your way, and then the end numbers are the ones that are going to really matter. This is approximately 4 bags of reflex silver Linkaloons, which is $80. This is a bunch of magic stars, which cost about $107, which, by the way, I love magic stars, but there are some, I don't remember what they're called, but there are some other star point type deals from MSR balloons. And the difference is these star points, they're quick to blow up because it's only two places you blow them up. I like to take the star points apart because you get more mileage out of it. But these other ones are about half the price. The only difference is they are individual spikes and there's 12 of them. What I love about that is I can take 12 spikes and I can get 3 little sections of 4 if I wanted, or you don't have to have 12 in one thing. That's a side point, but the price of them is about half as much and I like them better. So I'm going to start using them in the future. But back to the example, $80 in latex, $107 in magic stars. All the spheres, they're also from MSR. They come in all different sizes, and the total cost of those is $97. The neon rope light was like $120. There was 5 hours of labor to create this design. So my cost and my overhead and my profit, if I put it together in the job cost plus, was going to be $1,250. So think about that number, $1,250. It's a good number, right? How many of you have designs that you would sell for $1,250? I mean, personally, I love to create designs that I can charge a lot of money for because it is the thing that raises your value. I am creating more value because all of my designs have a higher price tag. So if you want to book any of this cool stuff from me, it's going to be something that a lot of decorators don't do. Now, that said, this design, those lights change colors, $1,250 would be a steal for a customer to pay for this wall. The picture doesn't do it justice, and this thing is 12 foot wide, so it's not even a slim wall. I wouldn't want any less than like a couple grand for this wall. So if I were to price this out, you could potentially do the cost plus, and then you could say, oh boy, that's just really not anywhere close to a number that I'm satisfied with. I would maybe want double that, right? Like maybe I would want like 2250 or something. And now we're talking about a number that is a little bit mixed between I've started with cost plus as a base and realized that's not going to work. So now I feel the value of this is more and that my customers are willing to pay more for it. So I'm going to mix intuitive pricing a little bit with value-based pricing, and then I'm going to come up with a number and I'm going to pitch it to my clients. So what could happen is you could come up with an idea and you could build this wall in your shop, in your house, in your wherever, and then you could say to your client, hey, I came up with this really cool design. This is what I'm thinking. Do you think this is something that your clients would be interested in? And if so, how do you feel about 1750 price tag, 2000 price tag, which I would probably go 1950. Or if you're going to go over 2000, I would probably make it like 2250, whatever. Do you think that that would work for your customers? And you're not actually asking them to buy it from you right then. Now, we're going to get at the very end, one of the very, 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 very last things I'm going to talk to you about is newbie pricing and bartering. What I love to do when I make something new like this is I'll have an idea and then I will absolutely find a client that I am going to force this product on them. But I do it in such a way that they would be really dumb to say no. And I could say, I have this idea that I think your event would be perfect for. And this is what it is. I describe it to them because I probably don't have a picture of it. It's kind of like this. It's like this. It's like this. This is a design that I would want like $1,900 for this. But I think it would be great for your event. You're already hiring us to do these other designs. I'm willing to do this design at half price for you because I want you to see it. Now, I'm not telling them I'm willing to do it at half price because it's not worth what I want for it. I literally gave them the value that I want to get from giving them that discount. And the value is I want you to see it because I know when you see it, you're going to book it in the future. And I have to get it out there. I need to get great pictures. So you're bartering a price for something else. I'm not giving away money. I'm trading money for value that now I'm getting value that actually doesn't cost them the $1,000 that I'm willing to reduce this for. Now remember, I was going to build this thing anyways just to get pictures. But now I'm building it for a client and I'm actually making a little bit of money to do it, right? So that's just a little tip on that particular design or one like it. It's a tip on trying to get people to buy something that is your idea that you really need to get out there. Okay, somebody, I think Isabel, you said, how do you price something out that you've never done before? This would be a prime example, right? I want a spider costume for Halloween. Okay, crazy person, like that sounds kind of crazy to me. How big do you want it? I don't know, maybe like 6, 8 foot big. Oh, okay. So this thing is huge, right? Where would you begin to price this out? If you were like, would you even start thinking, I'm going to count all the balloons. I'm going to figure this out. You don't even know how you're going to build it. And what if they didn't even give you a picture? So this was something I had my team create from my brain into their brain, and then they made it for me, which I think it actually turned out really good. However, I would tell you this is not a very practical Halloween trick or treat design because she had a really hard time ringing doorbells because she couldn't get close enough. But everybody loved this thing. It was amazing. So you could do some time and you could figure out, wow, there's nothing in my wheelhouse that we have that I could even compare this to at all. I don't have anything where I could say, well, the backside is kind of like whatever that we do. We don't do anything like it. The head is like nothing we do. This is something that we made from scratch. So what I would probably do is take my best guess on how much time do I feel like I am going to trade in order to make this design. And then I would say, in order for me to give up 5 hours of my life and a little bit of balloons, what is that worth to me personally, if I'm the one that has to do it? Right? So I'm just using that as an example. I don't know that this took 5 hours. It might have been closer to 4. I don't remember. But I am just doing, this is an early start. We're going to end as soon, like pretty soon. We're getting towards the end. In this case, I would basically, I just said, you know what, to me, $500 to $600 sounds good. So I'm gonna ask for 650, and then we're gonna go from there. I built this for myself, but if I was building it for somewhere else, that's a number that I'm willing to trade that estimated amount of hours for. So it's intuitive pricing using a little bit of information to give it. Does that make sense? Okay. I think this is one of the last examples, and I showed you this earlier. I did a wall for somebody and we charged them $16.50. If you look down here, I did 2 of these walls that did not have this wave feature on it, and I charged $16.50 for each of those walls. At Float, they had this amazing entrance, and then a week later, I get a client that has a beach theme baby shower. And this is a client that I know has money. So I don't jack up my prices on clients like this. What I do is I jack up the value. How much value can I give you that you're willing to pay for? So the normal backdrop would have been $16.50, but I wanted to add this wave. I've never done this wave. I have no idea how long it was going to take, but I felt like this wave was a very cool part of this design. So I wanted to charge a bit more, and you can see I charged $25.50 for that wall. And I just said that wave to me feels like it should bring up the value of the wall almost by half. So a 1650 wall, I added like 900 bucks, and that's what ended up happening here. This is 12-foot wide. It's in her house. We got a couple surfboards and a wave. That's the only real difference. So you guys see how I use one price to influence another one. Okay. This is a very good example that I'm going to breeze through. And this is an example why the Balloon Guild is here and why it makes sense to stick around with us. And it's a difference between two people making the same design, one with a recipe, one without a recipe. And you can see at the top, using the cost plus method, the one with a recipe would have sold this for $777. The one without a recipe would have sold it for $17.99. However, the one with a recipe would have spent 5 hours building it. This is a real example. Like, she spent 5 hours to build it. The one without the recipe, it took me 20 hours to make, plus the 5 hours to build it for the client. And without a recipe, you're going to spend twice as many balloons. Now, if one person can sell it for $1,800, don't you think they both could sell it for $1,800? The answer is yes. So then we're going to base the rest of our numbers on both people selling it for the same price. And I want to show you how much money you're going to make and the difference and why they're different. If you're the person doing the labor, the person with a recipe, it only costs them 5 hours of time, they're going to make $125. The other person worked 25 hours and made $625. So they actually made more money for working, but they worked a lot more. The profit difference between the two is pretty significant, and it's $12.45 versus $5.14. You're both getting paid as a manager. We're going to keep that same idea. Now, here's what's interesting is the take-home pay for the person with a recipe is $14.70 versus the one without a recipe is $12.39. The other big difference is the person that made $12.39 had to work 25 hours to make $12.39. The person who made $14.70 only worked 5. So this is a very extreme but real example of using a recipe that reduces your cost, actually increases your profit, and it saves you time. So you could either work 25 hours and make $12.39 or work 5 hours and make $14.70. I know which one of those two I would choose. So there's a really great example of how these recipes that we have in the Balloon Guild will save you a lot of time and make you more money in the process. All right, this part goes really fast, so we're almost done. Thank you guys for hanging in there. You should be updating your prices. Reasons for it is if your market changes, if something crazy happens, your prices are going to have to change with it. If you have changing direct cost, inflation, you bring on more employees, things change for you, so they need to affect what your prices are. If you have increased overhead and you haven't been factoring overhead in, or you're factoring overhead in now and you're realizing, holy crap, I'm way off, change your prices. My recommendation is to review and update your prices every 6 months. What I do is I raise my prices at the same time I give my employees a raise. Ideally, the price increase is going to do more than the extra cost to what I pay my employees. Okay, the very last section is talking about effectively communicating your prices to your clients. The big way to do it is in the way that you invoice them. You can invoice them with line item pricing or package pricing. You could include delivery and takedown as a line item. I recommend that you do. And then package pricing, I would still show it as a discounted price. Like the normal price would be $1,000. but for the package is minus $100, and I would put package pricing on it or something, so they can see the discount that they're getting. You're communicating the price and the value and the discounts that they're getting. The cost versus the value, the way that you communicate to your client, the cost is what they're going to pay, but the value is what they get. So we're selling the value. This entrance design here for this event that I did, I could say, yeah, I'm going to take some latex, I'm going to put some air in it, then I'm going to take some foil balloons, I'm going to put some air in those two, and I'm going to stick them all together and put them on the ceiling. That doesn't really communicate the value of that design at all. But as I tell them about a beautiful butterfly entrance, yada, 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 it's going to be amazing and all this stuff, then they're going to start seeing the value and they're going to want it a bit better. The last thing on this one is you're going to sell the things that you show. So if you want to sell a design, you have to show it to people. Get inspiration pictures, do some research online, show people, and then describe. It's going to kind of be like this, but I want to do this different, and describe it. Use your words. Getting reviews and feedback is a good way to determine where your prices fit. If everybody loves you and all it is positive all across the board all the time, then you should be able to, at an appropriate time, raise your prices without any problems whatsoever. As you educate your customers, if your customer gives you a budget, talking to them about all the different options for that budget is a good thing. When you do site visits, you can give them different options at different price points, but you're communicating depending on where they're interested, and you can find out like an appropriate pricing structure for their event. I did mention this already, newbie bartering prices. If you're going to discount items because you're new or because you're bartering, your invoice should show the full price, and then you should have a line item that shows the discount with the reason. That discount is buying you something. And that is what you want to do, so that the price stays the same. You're adding the discount separately. So in the future, you're just not going to add the discount. You're going to have your price, and it's the same as it always was, except for when you raise it. So this brings us to the end. Again, I know it was a lot. I told you your brains would be mush. Hopefully you guys are ready to go to sleep without a headache. You guys should all be, even if it's for the trial membership for the guild, you guys should be members of the guild. I hope that you've gained enough from this that's going to make you decide, you know what, I want to give this a shot. We have a lot of recipes online. We do a lot. We're going to continue to add trainings and all of that. They're going to be part of a guild membership. So hopefully this helps you guys out. I want to hear back from you in the future. Like when you guys start putting this to work, I would love to hear about it. I am going to be here for questions and answers. Obviously, you don't have to stick around. I'm going to pause the recording, and then I'm going to start it again, so the questions and answers will be separated.